Hey guys, hope you're all well. We are continuing with our crisscrossing of the North America, basically, testing and learning about the new R9 from the Uniden America company. Just a fabulous custom installed product. If you've been following our videos, this should be very, very clear. But along the same token, I like sharing stories and information that isn't necessarily directly tied to a specific radar detector or performance experiences. And we've been doing these videos either from the perspective of experiences and traps and speed encounters and or ticket scenarios and other things that go beyond the individual radar detector. And one of them I've been thinking about is to discuss the radar detector companies themselves, and over the years, the contributions that they've made to the industry. And if you know anything about me and my perspective, as you know, I've been driving with radar detectors for, 45 years plus. So been through probably more of this industry than most today online. So and garnered a lot of experience as a result of that extensive driving history. So I wanted to go walk back and think about detector companies. I'm going to mention the major ones and some of the highlights of what they contributed to move the industry along over these 4+ decades. And I want to start with Escort, or Cincinnati Microwave, which was the company. Escort was the the line of products basically that they had offered later, then effectively become eponymous with the product. So I'll just refer to them as Escort. When I was in college, Escort came out with the first DSP unit and super heterodyne unit, which really upset the industry in a positive way at the time with some of the technology. And at the time, basically X and K band were the two radar, KA and laser hadn't been anywhere near in use or even created at the time. And Escort really set the game for the top performing radar detector. And they did that with the original Escort, and then later with the first Passport, which was super small relative to the Escort that preceded it. And that was their contribution over the years of really just setting a high bar in performance. Beltronics, before they merged basically or combined with Cincinnati Microwave or Escort later, also made some very, very nice products and actually did a lot of engineering, including some of the detection platforms that made it into Escort products. And carried that brand, or actually both brands, for many, many years. The top product that comes to my mind is the 8500X50, which was in the Beltronics RX65. They were sort of like sister products, slightly different personalities, each unique in their own way, but overall offering a terrific amount of performance, which set the stage for future products. And with respect to Beltronics, they eventually came out circa 2007-2008 with the M3 platform, which was undetectable. And that was in response to the Spectra RDDs, which up until that time were in use fairly extensively in the state of Virginia, for example, where radar detectors had been illegal. In fact, are continued illegal to this day. And back in the day, in the 80s, Connecticut was another state where detectors were, banned, so to speak, although we drove with them all the time when we were in Connecticut. So they ultimately got rid of that. Virginia remains, the Commonwealth remains the only, other than Washington, D.C. and military bases, the only state that really has them outlawed. So Beltronics came up with the M3, what they referred to as the M3 platform, which was undetectable by the Spectre and also provided exceptional performance that was unheard of at the time with the STI driver. And those technologies ultimately made their way into Escort products in the form of the Red Line, which later came. And they began using Beltronics pretty extensively, some of that engineering in their products. Let's get on with the next company. Valentine, of course, came in the early 90s. And Mike, who I consider basically the pope of this industry, used to be associated with Cincinnati Microwave, had his hand in the design of their early radar detectors, and ventured out to create his own, I would say, boutique radar detector company, which upset the industry in a positive way again with a dual antenna radar detector that had arrows and high performance. This was well after KA, which was the radar band that was subsequently introduced after X and K. And they also had their laser detection circuitry, which really was unbelievable. In fact, when Laser came out and Valentine came out with their integrated laser detector that was so exceptional, and in some cases they were able to pre-alert with laser scatter or picking up laser that went through a vehicle ahead, the windshield, which was transmissive, really was the with that, and that there was really no countermeasure in the early 90s to laser. The impetus for Vail, the company that I created, and the technology we engineered, took me over 10 years to do that, well before laser jammers. But it just was a very difficult technology and used the stealth to help absorb and reduce the reflection of police laser that it needed to see its light. So when you couple that with a high-end radar detector like Valentine with its exceptional laser, it was a winning combination. So Valentine, though, stuck with a detector that was very, very good and the high water mark, in my opinion, at the time, but didn't necessarily push the envelope insofar as innovation subsequent to that. Maybe they felt they didn't need to. They were quite successful and had a wonderful following. So other companies, pushed that envelope, like Escort with GPS and all the technology. And we're going to talk about some of that in another video about what I consider the high water or important milestones of features that exist in radar detectors. Right now I'm focusing on radar detector companies and manufacturers and their contribution. Let's bring up K40. K40 is a radar detector company that's had a long history. K40 goes back, wonderful group of people, really enjoy knowing them. They were big into CB antennas, really big into CB antennas when CBs were all the rage in the day. And they expanded their reach. And where K40 made their contributions were the creation of remote custom installed radar detectors. In fact, they're really the first company that I regard as that really formalized the concept of the value of having remote custom installed radar detectors that really blended well into generally high-end vehicles. And in the process of doing that, they built a very, very loyal custom installer base and custom 12-volt installer base that remains to this day. And they basically pointed the way to other radar detector companies to create custom install radar detectors. And the big ones that came into the late 2000s was Beltronics. They ultimately entered into the market with the STI remote based on that M3 undetectable platform, and then the Escort 9500 CI, which were sister products. So, and laser, what they call laser shifters. The STIR did not offer that, but you needed a separate system for that, but completely integrated system. And so K40 really set the stage with a multi-module, multi-hit front and rear, laser jammer approach, and really nice displays and control modules that went into the car system. So that's K40's contribution, and they continue to have a loyal base and a loyal following. Let's go on to one of my favorite. I mean, I really like all of these companies because they each contribute to moving the industry forward in their own way. And I've driven with just about every manufacturer's radar detector over the years. Is Whistler. I've known Whistler for a very long time, met their engineering at an old SML speed measurement labs test in the early 2000s, and the Carl Force really created a testing environment which was that set the standard for many years to come, and in fact has had a great influence even to this day on how radar to test on closed course testing was done. And nice thing about Whistler is, and there was a perception, and we're going to get into Cobra briefly, that Whistler and Cobra were similar. I would say they were only similar in the regards that they catered to a more cost-conscious market and consumer that wouldn't necessarily be able to afford the cost or be willing to put the investment into these higher end and higher cost systems. So I look at Whistler as I do to an extent Cobra, of increasing the market share in the industry overall into the more cost competitive, and people start at the lower end, as I say when I say lower end, cost wise, and as they get more experience, more serious potentially, or more cognizant of all the threats that are out there, they become more of a serious user. They typically then move on to the higher end products, higher cost products. So Whistler always came with, I think, very, very good engineering within the limitations of their sensitivity. And I always felt their products were terrific since my knowledge and experience with Whistler, and often they offered features that sometimes exceeded higher end detectors, in my opinion, even if the higher end detectors had higher sensitivity or performance in the absolute sense. So Whistler continues to this day to be a player, and they've come out with a recent detector that we had a hand in the development over about 2 years, called the Whistler Titan, which really now puts them in the top tier of radar detectors. So they've sort of gone beyond what they historically have been, which was making radar detectors accessible to a large group of people. Excuse me. Takes me to Cobra. Now, Cobra also created a very large market and had a great impact on the industry. Some of them good, so far as increasing the knowledge of the use of radar detectors and making them accessible, and in another case, a little bit on the bad side for a very short period of time, or for a period of time, in the nature of the way they designed their detectors, which created a lot of other radar detectors to go off, particularly on the KA band, which was unfortunate and actually unnecessary. It just was an unfortunate side effect of a particular engineering approach that they did that really caused a lot of the other radar detector companies, even to this day, to come up with advanced filtering techniques on KA in particular to filter out those. Now, those detectors are long been gone, but the memory of that is long-reaching. But again, Cobra had a significance in increasing the market share to radar detector users and owners. Now we're going to fast forward to the teens of 2017, the mid-teens of 2017, and I actually regard this company now as probably having the most significant impact on the radar detector industry. And they basically came out of nowhere. They really dipped their toe into this industry on and off for a period of years with a couple or few detectors, and actually was the first company to implement some kind of GPS to some degree. So they brought that whole concept, which was then later developed subsequently by other detectors, and in most companies today you'll find GPS capability in all their detectors with the exception of Valentine, which has resisted the use of that. And Uniden really then upset the game with the Uniden R1 and R3. And prior to the introduction of those detectors, it was my belief, incorrectly, but my belief, that we had really reached the limitation of the performance of radar detectors insofar as alerting range, for example, and other features such as GPS and filtering. I regarded as the primary drivers of innovation going forward, and it actually turned out that I was proven, and many others, including the manufacturers, were proven tremendously wrong. And Uniden really just upset the game with an affordable detector that had eye-popping detection ranges that, again, were unheard of. In fact, I remember testing some of these detectors, and the high water mark for a dash mount at the time was the Escort Redline, based on the M3 platform, and it was just an unbelievable performance. And then I began seeing performance coming from the R3, in particular, their GPS version of this detector, that was sometimes 60%, 70% longer in range. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And it was often less expensive than other high-end detectors, such as the Valentine, price-wise historically, or the Escort. So they really upset the game. And I also know this not beyond just with my own driving experience, but with the reaction of the manufacturers. We had a number of sit-downs with these companies, and they felt the heat, and it really caused took a number of years for them to start to really react. And how Uniden did it and their engineers behind it was still to this day. Another thing that Uniden brought to the table was incredible displays. Really exceptionally good displays with information, lots of information, very colorful, very bright, and sort of reminds me of what at the time Cobra had also very colorful displays for a time. The K40 caliber also brought a nice display, but Uniden really brought this to a whole nother level, in my opinion, in their dash mount detector, starting with the R1 and R3, and it continues through the R7 and R8, even larger screens. And again, we're going to get into the features of radar detectors and what I consider significant, but Uniden now is involved, or ownership of the design and manufacturing of the detectors that they were using, and they've actually now have influence in other detector manufacturers like Redenso, even K40, and of course Uniden. So if you add up the impact of products that are created by Uniden, I would say they're probably the most significant influence now in this industry, and continues to be. And we're pleased to see them now at the Uniden R9, just going to be an exceptional piece. And so we expect to see great things. There may be a big piece of news coming down the line, which we're not at liberty to discuss, but would even have more of an impact. Just unbelievable. So anyway, over the 45 years I've been driving with radar detectors, we've pretty much touched on all of the significant players. And what I consider the contributions that they've made, the big contributions to moving this industry forward overall. And as I say, every radar detector company has an important contribution and continues to have an important contribution to this industry. And I have my personal favorites. RadarBusters has its popular sellers, and that's all well and good and true. But at the end of the day, my perception is, it doesn't really matter which detector you ultimately purchase, just as long as you purchase the detector, know how to use it, and become a better driver as a result of it. And again, every radar detector manufacturer brings a unique contribution to the industry, and that's reflected in their products. And there are a lot of choices out there, and hopefully RadarBusters helps in helping discern what all those nuances are. And some drivers are going to require certain things more than others. Certainly the performance of a radar detector could be more important in particular areas of the country or the world where people are driven, and you just have to do a little bit of research. RadarBusters can help, and hopefully some of these videos and reviews and reports that we have out there on RadarBusters.com help. So again, appreciate your watching. I hope it was helpful. Be sure to visit RadarBusters.com. Join us on Facebook, where we have unique content other than our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our mailing list, extensive mailing list, where we have important information that we'll occasionally push out. And if you like the video, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell, and share it on your social media. Help spread the word, and let's increase the health of this market and the quality of drivers who use radar detectors, right? They become better drivers. So take care, be safe, and we'll see you soon.